Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. Every wilderness we face on this earth points to a deeper wilderness inside the human heart. When a man or a woman is lost in the Australian bush, the silence of the trees, the endless stretch of the land, and the uncertain path ahead become more than a physical challenge. They become a mirror, reflecting what lies deep within. It is one thing to fight the heat, the thirst, and the loneliness of the wild, but it is another thing altogether to face the emptiness, the fear, and the searching that live inside the human heart. Out there, with no map and no road to follow, you quickly learn that survival is not just about finding a way through the wilderness. It is about finding a way through yourself. The wilderness on the outside strips away the comforts we take for granted. There is no warm bed waiting, no city lights to guide you, no easy voice on the other end of a phone. In the stillness, you hear your own thoughts more clearly than ever before, and sometimes that is the hardest wilderness to endure. Because when the world around you is quiet, the world within you begins to speak. That's when questions rise. Who am I when I have nothing? What do I truly depend on? What hope do I carry when every step feels uncertain? It is in those moments that the human heart reveals its wilderness. We carry fears, doubts, regrets, and longings, and when everything else is stripped away, those are the things we are left to face. The trees don't lie to us, the silence doesn't distract us, the bush doesn't cover up our weakness. Instead, it presses us to look inside and reckon with the truth. Some people discover despair in that moment, but others discover a strength they never knew they had. Because when the heart is emptied, it is ready to be filled with something greater than fear. The story of survival in the bush is more than an adventure. It is a reminder. When we hear of someone who walked through the heat of the day and the cold of the night, with only a faint hope of rescue, we are reminded that life itself is a wilderness. Every one of us, in some way, is walking through a land where the path is not always clear. We may not be surrounded by tall eucalyptus trees or the red dust of Australia, but we face wilderness in our families, in our work, in our thoughts, in our struggles. The wilderness of disappointment, the wilderness of loneliness, the wilderness of fear. These are just as real as the one you can see on a map. Yet there is something about the wilderness that also teaches us. It teaches us to listen. It teaches us to wait. It teaches us that life is not sustained by comfort alone, but by courage, by hope, and by faith in something greater than ourselves. You see, when a traveler in the bush keeps walking, keeps believing that just beyond the next ridge there may be a sign of life, a stream of water, or even a rescuer, that hope becomes their survival. And so it is with the heart. Without hope, the wilderness swallows us. With hope, we find the strength to take one more step, to live one more day, to trust one more time. The wilderness outside points to the wilderness within because both demand the same answer. What do we trust when everything else is gone? Where do we turn when the road disappears? How do we walk when the ground feels uncertain? The truth is, the wilderness is not the end. It is the beginning of discovery. It shows us our limits, but it also shows us the one who has no limits. It reveals our weakness, but it also points to a strength that never fails. And when we come out of the wilderness, we are not the same as when we entered it. So when we speak of survival in the Australian bush, we are speaking of more than trees and trails and nights beneath the stars. We are speaking of the heart's journey. Because every wilderness on this earth, no matter how dangerous, no matter how lonely, is a shadow of that deeper wilderness inside the human heart. And until that heart finds its way, no path will ever feel sure, and no survival will ever feel complete. That is why the wilderness outside is never wasted, because it leads us to face the wilderness within. Survival is never just about food and shelter. It's about courage, faith, and the will to keep moving. A man can have a little water, a handful of food, a thin roof over his head, and still perish if he loses the strength to believe in tomorrow. On the other hand, there have been those who had almost nothing, yet they lived because deep within them burned a will that refused to give up. Out in the Australian bush, with the sun blazing overhead and the night air turning cold, the greatest enemy is not always hunger or thirst. It is despair. And when despair takes hold, even the strongest body begins to fail. You see, food and shelter may keep the body alive, but courage keeps the heart alive. Faith lifts the weary soul when the weight of fear presses down, and the will to keep moving, step by step, even when there seems to be no end in sight. That is what brings a person through the wilderness. Out there, when every sound in the night stirs uncertainty and every shadow feels like danger, it is courage that whispers, "Don't give in." Courage doesn't erase fear, but it gives us the strength to walk forward in spite of it. Faith is even greater still. Faith is not simply hoping for a rescue. It is trusting that there is a way, that the wilderness will not last forever, that beyond the trees and the dry earth there is life waiting. Faith gives meaning to the struggle. It tells us we are not abandoned. It speaks when the silence grows heavy and says, "Hold on, a new day is coming." Without faith, the wilderness becomes a prison. With faith, even the harshest desert becomes a classroom where we learn how to endure. And then there is the will to keep moving. That, my friends, is often the difference between life and death. I've read the stories of men and women who were stranded, who felt the full weight of isolation, and yet they lived because they refused to lie down and quit. Even when their bodies were weak, they found one more step, one more hour, one more reason to go on. The will to keep moving is not born from strength of body alone, but from strength of spirit. And when that spirit is anchored in courage and faith, it cannot easily be broken. In many ways, this story of survival in the bush is not different from the story of our lives. Each of us, in one form or another, walks through a wilderness. Some of us know the wilderness of grief, where the heart aches for what has been lost. Others know the wilderness of fear, where the future looks uncertain and the nights feel long. Some of us walk through the wilderness of disappointment, where dreams seem to have faded. And just like the traveler in the bush, we find that food and shelter, comforts and possessions, are not enough to see us through. We need something deeper. We need courage to face the unknown, faith to believe in what we cannot see, and the will to keep moving even when everything inside us says to stop. And this is the truth. Those who endure the wilderness are not always the strongest, but they are the ones who refuse to give up. They are the ones who believe, who trust, who cling to hope when hope seems small. They are the ones who rise each morning, even if weary, and say, "I will not stop here. I will not let the wilderness defeat me." That kind of resolve is stronger than hunger, stronger than fear, stronger than the storm. It is what carries a soul through the darkest valley and into the light again. So survival is not just about finding food to eat or a place to rest. It is about finding the courage to stand when fear tells you to fall. It is about faith that lifts the heart when everything else is gone. It is about the will to keep moving when the road seems endless. For it is courage, faith, and endurance that carry us out of the wilderness, and it is these that show us what true survival really means. And that is why survival is never just about food and shelter. It's about courage, faith, and the will to keep moving. In the silence of the bush, we discover how small we are and how great the Creator is. Out there, in the wide Australian wilderness, there is a hush that no city noise can reach. The trees stand tall like ancient sentinels. The wind whispers through the leaves, and the stars at night shine with a brilliance most eyes never see. It is in that silence that a person begins to realize just how fragile, how limited, how small we truly are. Our voices fade, our strength weakens, and all the noise we once thought so important is gone. What is left is the undeniable truth that we are not as mighty as we imagine ourselves to be. You stand in that bushland, far from the comforts of home, and suddenly the air feels different. The ground beneath you stretches farther than your eyes can see. The silence itself feels alive, wrapping around you until you cannot escape it. In that moment, the pride of man seems foolish. The ambitions, the wealth, the busy schedules, the endless striving, all of it is stripped away in the presence of something far greater. It is there in that stillness that you realize the Creator has been here long before you drew your first breath and will remain long after your last. The wilderness has a way of humbling us. It shows us our need. We cannot control the rising of the sun or the setting of the stars. We cannot command the rain to fall or the earth to give us its fruit. We cannot silence the storms or call the winds to rest. In the bush, we are faced with our dependence, and we are reminded that all along we have been upheld by a hand far stronger than our own. Out there, stripped of distraction, it becomes clear that man is not the center of the universe. God is, and yet this humbling is not meant to crush us. It is meant to lift us, because when we see how small we are, we begin to see how great He is. The same Creator who shaped the stars above the wilderness sky is the one who knows your name. The same hand that painted the colors of the outback, the golds and reds of the land, is the hand that holds you. The greatness of God does not diminish our worth, it reveals it. For if one so mighty cares for you, then you are never truly lost, even when you wander in the silence of the bush. I think of how many people spend their lives running from silence. They fill their days with noise, with endless motion, because they fear what they might hear when everything grows still. But the silence of the bush does not lie. It tells the truth. It tells us that life is fleeting, that man is small, that we are not in control, and yet it also tells us that there is a presence greater than us, a love deeper than the wilderness, a Creator who does not abandon His creation. When a traveler finds himself lost in the bush, he may feel the weight of that silence pressing in, but if he listens, if he pauses, he may also feel the comfort of it. For in that stillness, the greatness of the Creator speaks louder than any sound. It speaks in the rising of the morning light, in the chorus of birds breaking the dawn, in the cool breeze that brushes across the face. The silence is not empty, it is full of the reminder that we are never truly alone. And so, in the bush, we discover something vital. We discover that man, with all his strength and all his inventions, is but dust compared to the majesty of creation. We discover that pride crumbles in the face of eternity. And we discover that the silence itself is a voice calling us back to the one who made us. It is a silence that humbles, but it is also a silence that comforts, because in the quiet of the wilderness we learn what we often forget in the noise of the world. We are small, but He is great. And in that truth we find our peace. Loneliness in the wild can break a man, but it can also shape him into someone stronger than fear. There is something about being cut off from the voices, the lights, the movement of the world that presses down on the human spirit in a way few other things can. When you find yourself in the middle of the wilderness, no road in sight, no voice to answer when you call, no hand to reach for when you stumble, that loneliness begins to settle over you like a heavy cloak. It whispers that you are forgotten, that you are forsaken, that you are too small to matter. And if you let it, that voice will break you. It will steal your strength, rob your hope, and leave you with nothing but despair. But loneliness does not always destroy. There are those who have walked into the silence of the wild and discovered that what felt like abandonment was in fact an awakening. Because in the place where human company fails, there is still the presence of the one who never leaves. And when you begin to realize that, the very thing that threatened to break you becomes the very thing that begins to shape you. Loneliness, when surrendered, becomes the fire that burns away fear. In the bush, you cannot rely on the crowd to keep you company. You cannot turn to the noise of the city to drown out your thoughts. You are left with yourself and with the silence. At first, that silence feels like an enemy. It makes every hour longer, every night darker. But if you endure it, if you lean into it, that same silence begins to strengthen you. It forces you to face the questions you have been running from. It teaches you to listen for a voice greater than your own. And it shows you that fear is not the master you once thought it was. I have read accounts of travelers who found themselves lost for days in the wild. Some gave in to despair. They lay down, believing they would never see another sunrise, and the wilderness swallowed them. But others, though the loneliness weighed heavy on their hearts, chose to keep moving. They sang into the silence, they prayed into the emptiness, they pushed one foot in front of the other, even when no one was there to encourage them. And those men and women found, on the other side of that lonely journey, a strength that no comfort could ever give. That is the strange gift of loneliness. It strips away what is shallow and forces us to build on what is lasting. It tears down the illusions we hold on to and shows us what really matters. Loneliness can remind us that we were never meant to walk alone, not in the wilderness, not in life. It can break the pride of a man who thinks he needs no one, and it can strengthen the faith of a man who realizes he needs God most of all. Fear thrives in loneliness. It grows louder when the world grows quiet. But when a man learns to endure that loneliness, when he learns to hear the still, small voice in the silence, fear loses its grip. For once you know that you are not truly alone, fear has no power over you. And a man who has faced loneliness and found strength in it becomes a man who cannot be easily broken again. He carries within him a quiet confidence, a resilience born not of crowds or applause, but of endurance in the silent places. So yes, loneliness in the wild can break a man. It can crush him if he lets it, but it can also shape him into someone stronger than fear, someone who knows the value of courage, someone who understands that silence is not emptiness but presence. And when that man walks out of the wilderness, he carries with him not just survival, but strength that will endure every trial yet to come. That is why loneliness in the wild can break a man, but it can also shape him into someone stronger than fear. The path out of the wilderness is found not by panic, but by trust, hope, and perseverance. When a man or woman first realizes they are lost, the instinct is often to run, to scramble, to do anything to escape the fear rising inside. Panic takes hold like fire, quick and consuming, pushing the heart to beat faster and the mind to spin with confusion. But panic is a liar. It clouds judgment, it blinds the eyes, and it drives a person deeper into the very wilderness they are trying to escape. Many have been overcome not because the wilderness was too strong, but because panic weakened their will before the fight had truly begun. In contrast, the ones who find their way are those who learn to still their hearts and place their trust where it belongs. Trust is the anchor that steadies a soul in the storm. In the bush, trust may look like leaning on the wisdom of the land, following the signs of nature, or waiting for rescue when every instinct tells you to run blindly. But in life, trust is something greater. It is resting in the truth that there is a guiding hand beyond what we can see. It is the confidence that though the path may not be clear to us, it is never hidden from the one who leads. That kind of trust does not silence the wilderness, but it silences the fear that comes from believing we must face it alone. Alongside trust, there must be hope. Hope is what keeps a man's eyes lifted when the shadows grow long. It is what whispers in the heart that no night lasts forever, that dawn will break, and that every step forward carries meaning. Without hope, despair takes root, and despair is just as deadly as panic. But hope is the light that pierces through the darkness. It is the promise that the wilderness will not last forever, that beyond the dry and lonely ground there is a place of rest, of safety, of life. The man who holds onto hope may stumble, he may grow weary, but he will not quit because he knows there is something worth pressing on for. And then there is perseverance. Trust steadies us, hope lifts us, but perseverance moves us. It is the daily choice to take another step, to face another hour, to endure another night. Perseverance is not flashy, it is not quick, but it is steady and it is strong. Out in the wild, it is the choice to walk instead of collapse, to wait instead of give up, to believe instead of surrender. And in life, perseverance is the quiet strength that carries us through sickness, through heartbreak, through disappointment, through every valley we never thought we could survive. It does not rely on emotion, for emotions rise and fall. It relies on commitment, on the decision that no matter what, I will not stop. These three, trust, hope, and perseverance, form the path out of the wilderness. Not panic, not fear, not the frantic scramble of desperation. The wilderness teaches us this lesson with clarity, because when we give in to panic, the bush closes in tighter, the way becomes darker, and the end feels nearer. But when we choose trust, hope, and perseverance, the wilderness becomes not the place of our defeat, but the place of our growth. It is there that our faith deepens, our character is refined, and our strength is proven. How many lives have been destroyed by panic? Panic in the face of financial loss, panic in the midst of illness, panic when relationships falter. But how many lives have been redeemed by trust, by hope, by perseverance? These are the qualities that turn a lost traveler into a survivor, and a survivor into a witness who can tell others the way. So when we face our wilderness, whether it is out in the vast silence of the Australian bush or in the struggles of our daily lives, may we remember that panic will never lead us out. It is trust that steadies us, hope that strengthens us, and perseverance that carries us to safety. That is why the path out of the wilderness is found not by panic, but by trust, hope, and perseverance. This story reminds us every bush, every storm, every lost trail can become the very ground where strength is born. We don't often think of hardship as the place where strength is forged. Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid the storms, trying to find the clear roads, trying to walk only in places where the path is smooth and the way is certain. But life does not work that way. Just as a traveler in the Australian bush cannot choose to remove the storms, the rocky paths, or the thorny brush, so we cannot choose to live untouched by difficulty. And yet, it is often in those very places, the hardest places, that something inside us grows stronger than it ever could have in comfort. When a person is lost in the wild, each obstacle becomes a teacher. The storm teaches endurance, the darkness teaches faith, the endless wandering teaches perseverance. What feels like punishment at first becomes preparation. What feels like weakness reveals hidden strength. And what feels like the end often turns out to be the beginning of something new. We don't discover who we truly are when everything is easy. We discover it when the winds rise, when the rain falls, when the trail disappears and we are left with nothing but our will to carry on. Strength is not born in safety. It is born in struggle. Think of the seed that must break through the hard ground before it can become a tree. Think of the fire that purifies gold until it shines. Think of the traveler who survives the wilderness and walks out not just alive, but changed. The bush, the storm, the lost trail, these are not accidents. They are the very ground where strength is tested and where character is shaped. And though the struggle may feel like it will break us, in truth, it is often what makes us. There is something about hardship that strips away what is shallow. It takes away the illusion that we are in control. It takes away the comforts that keep us soft, and it forces us to rely on something deeper than ourselves. It is then that strength is born. A man who has walked through the wilderness, who has faced loneliness, hunger, fear, and uncertainty, does not return the same. He carries with him a quiet power, a knowledge that he can endure more than he ever thought possible. He no longer fears the storm because he has lived through one. He no longer fears being lost because he has learned that even in the darkest place there is a way forward, and so it is with our lives. The hardships we dread are often the very places where God does His greatest work in us. The bush becomes the place where we learn courage. The storm becomes the place where we learn faith. The lost trail becomes the place where we learn perseverance. And when we emerge on the other side, we are not only survivors. We are stronger, wiser, and more steadfast than before. Every person who has walked through suffering and come out with hope intact knows this truth. You look back on the trial and realize that while you would not have chosen it, you would not trade what it gave you, because it gave you strength, it gave you endurance, it gave you a deeper trust than you had before. And those are treasures greater than comfort. The wilderness, the storms, the lost trails, they are not wasted. They are the ground where strength is born, where faith is tested, where courage is proved. And if we walk through them with trust, with hope, with perseverance, we will find that what once threatened to destroy us has instead prepared us. We will find that what once seemed like the end has become the very soil where new life grows. That is why this story reminds us, every bush, every storm, every lost trail can become the very ground where strength is born. Thank you for walking with me through this story of survival and faith in the wilderness. If these words gave you strength, courage, or hope, I invite you to keep this journey going. Hit that like button. Share this message with someone who needs it. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Together, let's keep learning, growing, and finding light in the darkest places. Until next time, stay strong, keep the faith, and never give up.